What is up? How are you? It's good to see you. Welcome to Bookalina. In today's video, I want to talk about my favorite memoirs. First up is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So this was written by a woman who back in 2015 attended a college party and you basically follow her through the incident. The book takes you through the attack, through what happened subsequently afterwards, the trial, and eventually the verdict, which, although came back guilty, her attacker was given a maddeningly light sentence, and it just deals with all of that. The subject matter is obviously very heavy, but Chanel brings some levity to the story. A lot of memoirs make you feel like a voyeur, like you're very much on the outside looking in, but Chanel really brings you with her. So you're actually right there with her. You're there at the hospital when she is trying to piece things together. You can feel her frustration. You are right there with her at her parents' house in California. You're there with her at the trial as well. It's definitely my favorite memoir that I have read in a long time. Next on my list is Strange Days by Patricia Kenneally. Now, I read this when I was, I think, my late teens or early 20s. And throughout most of my teen years, I was completely obsessed with The Doors. Obsessed. And I read every book there was. I read every book I could find on The Doors. I loved No One Here Gets Out Alive. But I think this is actually my favorite. Now, I know that there has been some controversy in regards to Patricia Kenneally's relationship with Jim Morrison. So, backtracking, sorry. This book was written by a woman who dated Jim Morrison for several years. They had a Wiccan ceremony wedding. So she wrote this memoir basically chronicling her time knowing him and dating him. However, in the years following the book's release, there were people who were questioning how close she really was with Morrison. She has been accused of embellishing the story for the sake of the book. The partner that Jim Morrison had throughout his adulthood, who kind of has gotten the most, press, for lack of a better word, is Pamela Courson. She was the woman that he was with when he died in Paris. Pamela Courson died shortly after he did from a heroin OD. And there's still been a lot of mystery, a lot of unanswered questions regarding Jim Morrison's death. The circumstances were very strange. But I don't know, Patricia's writing has always come across as very sincere to me. She's an excellent writer. The book is extremely engaging. Even if you're not a Doors fan at all, you can absolutely read this book and enjoy it for what it is. I mean, it's a love story, but she has a very straightforward, no bullshit way of telling it. I especially liked the later chapters where she talks about being on the set of the Doors movie. She acted as like a consultant for that movie. She talks about the problems that she had with the movie, her problems with Oliver Stone in his storytelling. She is actually in that film. She is the woman who officiates this Wiccan ceremony between Jim Morrison and the character in the movie of Patricia Kenneally, who is played by, I think, Kathleen Quinlan. Sorry, quick correction. She offered to be a consultant on the movie, and Oliver Stone said no, that he didn't want her help. So she was actually just on set to play this tiny role in the movie. I also liked how she talks about Jim's relationship with Pamela Courson and how she didn't really understand it. She didn't really get what Jim saw in this very flighty, drugged out woman. She kind of sees her as like kind of like a bimbo. And I also liked that she does not romanticize his drinking. She talks about the fact that he was never really that drunk when he was with her, and that she took that kind of as a compliment, and how she kind of does want him to get his shit together. Next up is Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. This book was released around the time that I started working at a bookstore, and it was on all the bestseller lists forever. And I kind of avoided reading it for that reason. Sometimes things get so popular and so hyped up that you're just like, nah. But after the hype died down, I decided that I would give it a shot, and I really loved it. It chronicles Frank McCourt's life in poverty growing up in Brooklyn and later his native Ireland. His father was an alcoholic. He could not keep a job. They were constantly poor and starving. He saw a lot of death. A lot of children that his parents had passed away very, very young. It is depressing, but it's also very funny and vibrantly written. It won the Pulitzer in 1997. Next up is Wasted by Marja Hornbacher. So I read this for the first time when I was in my early 20s, and it absolutely wrecked me. It does deal with, so if that's something that does trigger you or upset you, I do not recommend that you read this book, because it goes into really graphic detail. I mean really graphic detail. Marja was only 21 when she wrote this book, and as you're reading it, it's a little hard to believe that, because she has a wisdom and a maturity far beyond those years. But to go through what she had been through at that point, because her issues with food started so young, you can tell that she's lived a lot. She's been through a lot of shit by the time she wrote that book. I have read this book probably 4 or 5 times at this point. I try to read it like every few years. I haven't read it in a while. I haven't gone back to it in a long time. But every time I read it, I'm in a different place in my life. I'm in a different headspace, and it brings a fresh perspective every time. This book is brilliant. It is so layered and emotional. And again, I think what's so scary about it is that you are not a voyeur outside looking in with this book. You are right there with her, and it's intense. And last on my list is What Remains by Carol Radziwill. So Carol was married to the son of Lee Radziwill. Lee Radziwill is the sister of Jackie Kennedy, or Jackie Onassis. So her husband, Anthony, and JFK Jr. were best friends. So the book talks about her relationship with her husband, JFK Jr., and his wife, Carolyn. As we know, things ended in tragedy. She lost all 3 people in a very short span of time, and I just cannot imagine going through that level of grief. It is one of the most elegantly written books I've ever read. There is so much grace and so much depth in not just her writing, but the story. This is the memoir that I would recommend to anyone who maybe hasn't read anything nonfiction for a while, or is looking for a really good memoir to read. This is the one that I would recommend, What Remains by Carol Radziwill. So that's it. That's my list. Thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe. Please comment down below. Let me know what your favorite memoir is. And I will see you guys very soon. Take care.